Hi there. If you are going through this slideshow, you have probably volunteered to be a transport volunteer for us here at the Wildlife Center of the North Coast. So first of all, we'd like to thank you for agreeing to help us with transportation of wildlife to and from the center. This slideshow is designed to just give a brief overview of some of the information that is useful to have as a transporter and help you feel more comfortable with the process of transporting and potentially capturing wildlife for transport. Here on this slide, you can see some of the recommended tips that we give people that can help to minimize the amount of stress that an animal experiences in the transport process. So one thing we always recommend both in the transport process, and we also recommend it to volunteers here at the clinic, is just to minimize noise around wildlife, as well as to minimize visual stimuli. So wildlife are obviously fearful of people, and as wild animals that we're hoping will be re-released into their natural environment, we actually want them to stay fearful of people. The other thing is that being injured or in distress is very stressful for an animal, and additional stress can actually be dangerous to their health. Shock and stress are actually leading causes of death for wildlife. So the more that you can minimize the stress of the situation by keeping your vehicle quiet, by keeping the container that the animal is in covered so that they're not seeing you or seeing what's going on inside the car, that's going to benefit the animal. We also ask that you consider the length of time for both the transport and the length of time that people have been holding on to the animal. And that actually kind of connects to one of these bullet points that's down at the bottom, which is temperature. And if you have an animal for a long period of time, driving it from one location to another, so it's a long transport, or perhaps it's been held by people for a long period of time, we just ask that you're really mindful of the fact that temperature regulation is of concern for wildlife. And so if an animal is going to be in the car for a long period of time, making sure that the car isn't too hot or too cold, that the animal should be at a comfortable temperature. If it is, say a seabird that's gotten really cold and now you're going to be transporting it for, an hour or 90 minutes, you might actually need to think about ways to help keep that bird warm. And we can talk a little bit about more about that on another slide. You're going to want to minimize handling of the animal. So, once the animal is captured in a container, that should be the only handling that happens until it reaches us here at the center. When it comes to what you put the animal in for transport, you'll want to make sure that you have the most appropriate container that you can find. So if it's, a small bird, you're not going to want to put it in a large dog kennel, right? Because it would escape or potentially injure itself. For animals that can easily fit into a small cardboard box, a cardboard box is great. You can, close up the top and even put a little tape on the ends and ensure that the animal will be safe inside. For larger animals, sometimes it's necessary to use like a dog crate or a dog kennel, and we just ask that you cover it with a towel or a sheet so that the animal isn't seeing out and having stress from like the visual stimuli there. And then also just consideration of the animal's injuries. So this maybe goes more, there's more to think about here when it comes to actual capture of the animal, but it's going to be important to make sure that if you're needing to handle the animal at all, you're really mindful of any area of the animal's body that might be injured or be causing it pain. It can feel intimidating to handle a wild animal, so it's important to have confidence and a firm but gentle manner so that the situation is as safe as possible for everyone involved. And you don't you don't want to be going into this situation feeling timid or with a lot of trepidation or feeling really nervous or anxious, because it can encourage you to make mistakes that might be unsafe for you or for the animal. So we just always encourage people to, go forward with confidence, but also being really mindful of keeping both yourself and the animal safe. So a few tips here. You'll always want to make sure that you know where the animal's head is and that you have control of the head for safety. So that's, with birds, if they're going to bite you, it will be with their beak, right? So you want to make sure that you have a sense of where that is and that you get good control over the animal's head in order to make sure that its beak isn't dangerous for you. Make sure that the animal is well covered. So you'll use a sheet or a towel. We'll talk more about that. If you are the one capturing the animal. For a lot of transport volunteers, you'll be picking up an animal that's already been captured and is in a box, and your only considerations are going to be your car environment and making it as peaceful as possible for the animal. But if you are doing capture, making sure that the animal's well covered, any sharp parts are tucked in and covered or are being held safely to keep both you and the animal safe. And capture should be done quickly and it should be done quietly. So again, minimizing noise, minimizing visual stimuli so that you're keeping the animal as calm as possible. A few additional tips. You always want to approach wildlife cautiously and slowly. So, confident but cautious. Knowing that an animal is likely to try to either escape or defend itself if it sees you as a threat, and it's likely to see you as a threat. So, approach slowly, approach quietly, but without appearing fearful or anxious. Like, make sure that you are confident about what you're doing, but that you are also mindful about what you're doing. If an animal is in the road, move it out of the path of traffic, even if it's already dead. Roadkill can actually create a lot of both traffic issues and safety issues for other animals who may try to land in the road to feed on an already dead animal. So if you are trying to capture an animal and you think that it might be a multi-step process, if you can find a way to safely scoot it off the road, that's a great first step. If the animal has already died, getting it out of the road is still useful, even if you're not planning to transport it. And obviously try to minimize direct contact with the animal. Here you can see we have a quick video of how to do a bird capture. So we'll watch Ginger, our wildlife rehabilitator here, is going to carefully, slowly open up the cage. Let's get control of the animal's head, put one hand on the head, make sure that the head is covered. Keep control of the head while making sure that the animal is covered, and then gently but firmly picking the animal up and moving it to the desired location. So obviously this is happening in a clinic setting and not out on the side of a road somewhere, but the idea is the same, that you're basically wanting to get the animal covered so that it can't see you. And actually that's very calming for a lot of animals. It helps a lot in terms of their stress response if you take away the visual stimuli. And then once the animal is covered, making sure you have a sense of where its sharp parts are so that you can safely handle it and put it into a container. The next couple of slides talk a little bit about useful materials to have on hand when you are going to capture an animal. So we recommend a large towel for most birds. If you're capturing something very small, like a songbird, you could use a pillowcase instead, so that's also handy to have. A cardboard box is, for most birds or small mammals, is going to work fine. You can store it flat in your trunk and then put it together as needed. In a pinch, a paper bag will work because it's not going to have any sharp parts. It's not got any metal or anything that an animal can hurt themselves on. If you think you're going to be doing very much capture and transport, having a pair of gloves handy is also useful. And having a field guide or a good app on your phone. So in the event that you are capturing and transporting something because you yourself found it and not because we told you to go looking for it, you might need to tell us what you think you found. And this is also a great way to sort of be a go-to wildlife responder for the folks in your community or your neighborhood. If they know that you transport for us, that you have these things handy in your car to make it easy to transport, and that you can help, identify things and get in touch with us about, what they are and what next steps should be, makes you a pretty useful person in the neighborhood. If you wanted to put together a more complete kit, a little more comprehensive, you're planning to do a lot of transport, planning to help a lot with, capturing animals as needed. Here's some additional things you could think about. Some things that we already talked about, like having, old sheets or towels. But you could also get like corrugated cardboard or corrugated plastic container that can be stored flat and then easily reused every time you need it. Goggles if you were concerned at all about bird beaks, maybe a sturdier pair of gloves, flashlight in case you're doing something where you're helping do a nighttime rescue, a plug-in heating pad with an adapter for your car. So if your car has heated seats, you could certainly use heated seats. For situations like we talked about earlier where maybe you have a seabird and it's very cold and needs warmth on the way to the center, turn on your seat heaters. But if you don't have those, you could certainly also use a plug-in heating pad with one of those little adapters to plug into the console of your car. And then keeping phone numbers handy for Wildlife Center of the North Coast, but maybe also animal control in the event that you've found an animal we're not able to take or help with. Department of Fish and Wildlife, I was going to say ODFW, which is the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, in the event that it makes the most sense to call them. So maybe just having a little, cheat sheet handy with those numbers so that it's very easy to make the necessary calls. And that's kind of an overview. As we are, building our transport network up, we just want to make sure that anyone who is new to capturing and transporting animals for us has a sense of best practices, but of course, never attempt to capture wildlife if you don't feel comfortable or if it doesn't feel safe. You can always call us and ask us if we can find someone to help with that piece of things. And again, if you are simply transporting, it's really going to be about the steps on that first slide for minimizing the stress for the animal. And as always, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions.